We start, though, with the Irish singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor, who's never been a conventional figure, nor, in fact, of course, would she want to be. The video for her cover version of Prince's song Nothing Compares to You, in which a single tear trickles down her beautiful face, is one of music's unforgettable moments. Sinead, though, has never chosen the easy path in life. She's said some uncomfortable things about Ireland and the Catholic Church. She's the woman who tore up an image of the Pope live on American television. She's been open, too, about her bipolar diagnosis, and is now perhaps better known for her activism than for her music. I asked her, does she ever feel that she's something of a lone voice?
I don't know that I would agree with that, but I think that perhaps the point of view that I was attacking it all from might have been an isolated point of view, because my interest in terms of the church and that was really the misrepresentation of the Holy Spirit, actually. And I think in that regard, to some extent, certainly in the art world, I might have been a bit of a lone voice.
What do you mean by that, the misrepresentation?
Well, what I mean is when you look at what happened in Ireland with the church and everything, and why it's so important is because the church was such a huge part of Irish culture, you know, but looking back on it, you'd see that the victims of abuse have now, after an awful struggle, obviously been heard. You see that the corrupt priests have been heard and given very small jail sentences, I might add. And you see that the Vatican are very busy trying to be heard, but there's one voice to me that hasn't been heard at all, or doesn't even get thought of in it, and that's the Holy Spirit. The actual, you know, thing that's supposed to be what the church is all about has been completely brought into nothing but disrepute, and nobody was standing for it. That's what bothered me, as well as wanting to stand for the victims. For example, I'm someone who really does believe that there is a Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, and that mattered to Irish people, that there was. And I didn't want to necessarily get rid of Catholicism, but what I felt was that something had taken over Catholicism that didn't belong to Catholicism at all. It was bringing it into nothing but disrepute. And there was a lot of, at the time, this is 20 something years ago, a whole lot of rock stars. No, it was quite fashionable to be waving around your award, thanking God for it. But then when it came to pitch battle in the street, or as I saw it, for the honour of God, without whom I wouldn't have had music, and neither would any of the rest of us who wave our grammars around thanking God, the pitch battle in the street for the honour of that thing, there was no one there. Tumbleweed. That's where I was coming from, because I felt that thing that gave artists so much should really, you know, get stood for.
So through all this, your faith has been absolutely rock solid.
Well, yeah, I call it knowledge, because faith implies to me that it's something that you don't know.
You've also done a lot of work for causes, particularly mental health causes, a concert for Mad Pride in Ireland quite recently. How long ago was that?
That was October, I believe. Yeah, 19th of October.
Why are you so convinced that that's the right thing, the right cause to attach yourself to?
Well, again, I suppose as an Irish artist, now I'll tell you honestly, I've changed my attitude toward Ireland since cringingly, embarrassingly recently we had to have a referendum, believe it or not, to establish the rights of children to exist as individuals and their own rights. It was in our constitution that they didn't exist as individuals, so they had no rights. You know what I mean? That's very dark ages kind of stuff. And when I realised that night that only 30% of the population voted, I stopped giving a toss about Ireland. Genuinely, I don't care anymore. Up until that point, I was interested in campaigning for Ireland. I had the Irish flags painted up the side of my house, which I've now changed with Rasta colours. But now, I'll tell you honestly, I will never fight for an Irish issue ever again, after the fact that only 30% of people voted for children's rights to be in the Constitution. If that vote had been about material things and money and this, that and the other, everybody would have voted. So I was staggered to see that, you know, you might put in all this love to your country, 70% of people couldn't be bothered voting. So I couldn't give a toss now, so I don't care what happens to Irish people anymore.
How are you at the moment? How are you feeling?
Good, yeah, much better. I was ill last year because I was on, what's the way to put it, I have bipolar disorder. There are two types. I have the second type, which is the depressing type. Unfortunately, it's not the high type.
Right.
And I was on meds for years for the wrong type, and I had put on a lot of weight, and I went to see about losing weight, and I got taken off meds completely. And I wasn't supervised, of course. I didn't realise I was getting ill. I was on tour and I got finally back on meds, and I had a really odd reaction to where it can quadruple your symptoms, basically. And it took a while to figure out that's what the hell was going on. So I got quite ill and I had to leave tour, blah, blah, blah. But I always say I used to be a werewolf, but I'm all right now.
Don't do that, Sinead. Actually, you can make that gag. That's
well, I
right.
can, of course.
Yeah.
You know, I guess
Can you try it? I
like
know
that.
it's difficult, but if you can try to take us into your world a bit, because there's so much of a lack of understanding of this.
Bipolar disorder, you mean?
Yeah.
I can only speak from my own experience. I don't know what it's like for anyone else. You're quite functional when you're on meds, obviously. But for me, the main symptom was this dreadful suicidal compulsion for no reason particularly, and or you might interpret anything as a perfectly logical reason. Do you know what I mean? It's a compulsion, almost like the cartoons. You're sleepwalking, following the ghost. That's what it's like. You've got this mad compulsion. Sometimes it's not even when you're in a bad mood. You might be in a great mood and start romanticise about suicide, you know. But it wasn't a great mood at all, a very painful place to be. But it is an illness that you would die from if you weren't on meds, you know, because that compulsion is so enormous, you know. But what people don't often understand about mental illness, there are physical symptoms also. Like, for example, when towards the end of that tour, it got to the point where it's basically like your body is a bucket with holes in it, you're just leaking water. You can't be awake without crying. Your entire body roaring, crying for no reason, do you know what I mean? So, of course, you can't function, you know, in that condition. So what happened was it can take months to get sick when you come off meds. And then the difficulty for me in Ireland trying to find a doctor was, you know, how do I find a doctor who can get past, you know, whatever prejudice they might have about.
Do you think that's a real problem, do you?
Well, my difficulty was actually, sadly, that my psychiatrist was very involved in the church struggle on the other side to me.
Okay.
I had to come to England finally to find a doctor who would actually get me back on meds and get me well.
This might be a really ignorant question, and forgive me if it is, but do you see any link between your illness and your creativity?
Yeah, I do. And I have an opposite experience to most people in that I don't adhere to this thing of, you know, don't take the meds, you know, suffer for your art. I don't believe in that at all. I think that's nonsense, especially when your main symptom is, you know, suicide. That's not very creative. But my experience too is that there are useful things about bipolar disorder, positive things. You know, you can think of 100 things at the same time. You can be making up 100 tunes at the same time. You could be hearing 100 melodies at the same time. You know, what I noticed was that I didn't have it all my life. I only got it after my son, who's now 8, when he was about 5 months old, something happened, and that's when this thing developed. I noticed, since then, that my relationship with music is much deeper. It's some of my mates and that get a bit annoyed at me because my relationship with music is so deep that once I start listening to it, I can't stop. You know, that way I'd just be ignoring everybody or whatever.
And is it your own music you're talking about? Or
No, just all music. Just to feel music very, very deeply. Do you know what I mean? And I've always felt music very deeply, but I noticed since the development of the illness, I feel music even more deeply. So there's obviously some relationship. I hear other artists who have this condition saying that they find that quite negative. The relationship they have with their art suddenly becomes painful or difficult. I don't at all. I find it quite wonderful. I don't find it exhausting at all. I find it wonderful. It just made me really appreciate music, and music is always there for me to fall back on if there's any difficulty or even any greatness. There's always music, you know, for good things and bad things, you know. So anyway, I think it's useful if you are a musician for your relationship with music to deepen because of a mental illness, but probably not very useful if you're trying to get on with a regular job or you've got to like teach people or something and you can't stop thinking about muddy waters.
Sinead O'Connor, and she performed in the studio for us too. Here is the song. It's called Reason With Me. It's from her most recent album, How About I Be Me and You Be You.
You don't know me, but I stole your laptop and I took your TV. I sold your granny's rosary for 50p. And I even pulled out hijack, said I had a hypodermic in me backpack, but I was only bluffing. Junkie, I ought to wrap it up and mind my monkeys. I really want to mend my ways. I'm gonna call that number one of these days. It's not too late. I'm the one who sits in the back room. I'm the one who doesn't know how to have fun. I'm the one to smoke a mist all around me. me, 'cause I don't want no one around me. 'Cause if I love someone, I might lose someone. If I love someone, I might lose someone. Oh, so long I've been a junkie. I ought to wrap it up and mind my monkeys. I really want to mend my ways. I'm gonna call that number one of these days. I'm gonna reach a hand out to you. Say, would you pull me up now, could you? I don't want to waste the life God gave me, and I don't think that it's too late to save me. It's not too late. Reason with me. Let's reason together.
Sinead O'Connor, the song Reason With Me.